Hi everyone and welcome to another event of George Brown College Analytics Club events series. Today we have a guest speaker with us who needs no introduction. But before we introduce this guest speaker, I'd like to introduce our moderator for today's event. And he's Professor Dr. Edward Perry. For those of you who don't know Dr. Perry is a professor at George Brown College and also an adjunct professor at Fairleigh Dixon University as well as St. Lawrence College. He has extensive knowledge in scientific research and he will be our moderator for today. So without much ado, I'll leave the ball to Dr. Perry to take the seats. Dr. Perry, you're welcome.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So this day we are going to discuss research with Dr. Robin Yap. So let me give you a little bit of an introduction to Dr. Robin Yap just to begin. He's a professor at our Center for Business, and he has a very deep understanding in performance and talent management, social data analytics, AI, robot ethics, and applied technology in business and entrepreneurial practices. He has an interdisciplinary background with 6 academic degrees and has worked with Fortune 500 companies, having executive level global responsibilities spanning over 3 decades. He has over 100,000 followers on his combined social media channels, authored 2 textbooks and 2 compendiums, and has over 24 competencies and employability skills that he's working on for the new Umology Lab at GBC. His research is going to be characterizing the employability skills of the 2030s and working in multicultural and multi-generational AI-enabled robot workshops. I will let you explain that, Dr. Yap. He is the chair of our school's Research Ethics Board. So give us a little bit more introduction in regards to the robot thing before I start our questioning today.
That is just way too much robot thing. So I got a latest grant from the federal government on the study of the impact of newcomers' country of origin's work ethic in environments with advanced convergences of technologies like AI-enabled robots. So ultimately, at the end of the day, if you peel that into different layers, you will see that we need to study the ethical components of AI, the acculturation of newcomers into the Canadian workplace, and the impact of technologies into the work environment's culture. So it's quite an extensive thing. We have the grant for the next 2 years, so we have a bit of time to study it. But I'll talk more about that and how I actually came about doing that. So, yeah.
Wonderful. So today's topic is research, and I know that you have an extensive amount of experience in this area. So I'm going to start off with a question that I hope you can enlighten our students on. Based on your experience, what are the hot topics in research right now? You talk about AI, you talk about robotics. What are some of the hot topics that you've experienced?
Well, a lot of studies have come out regarding COVID and pandemic. That's understandable because we want to understand what's in front of us, what's making everybody go through a variety of emotions. So you'll see it from a sociology, anthropology, psychology side, any of the social sciences. You'll see it on the medical side. You'll see studies on, and it's all pandemic and COVID, on work environments and how businesses are transforming. We love the word pivot, and everybody's pivoting, but does that actually mean? So there's a lot of studies around that. At the end of the day, it is one topic that is important for now. When you're looking at hot topics, you want the topic that you will be living with that content for a couple of months, if not years, when you're writing. So you have to be quite excited about it, and it has to continue to be topical in the environment that you're at. So another topic that we have been seeing is around wearables. So we have, your Apple Watch, for example. That's just one wearable. There's many, many wearables. And considering now that we're working online, there are wearables on augmented reality, mixed reality, virtual reality, any of the realities. So we're seeing a lot of that. Nanotechnology is quite interesting because when this whole pandemic they find a vaccine, for example, how is that going to be delivered? So various delivery mechanisms are being studied. Nanotechnology is part of that. Do we now have drugs in our bodies so that for the next pandemic that happens, we already have that and we can get drugs delivered into our body a little bit quicker? And of course, artificial intelligence is going to be a hot topic for the decade because there's quite a bit of content around need for discovery on how AI is actually impacting our lives. And then probably the last one is around data and privacy. So as data analytics folks, we all love data and we all like to understand exactly how data is going to be impacting our lives. But then part of that is the ethical component of it, privacy, the regulatory component of that. So there's many slices within the world of data analytics that can be studied.
So now that we know the hot topics right now, how would a student go about choosing a specific topic that is appropriate for their studies and for their lifestyle?
I think at the end of the day, you want a topic that interests you. So there's a variety of strategies around that. Are you puzzled by a particular phenomenon? So if I go into data and pandemic as a combination, remember, when you look at topics, they don't have to just be in one discipline. They could be multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary. So my studies are always interdisciplinary as I merge various disciplines together because you're creating new knowledge, right? So you're validating content that's already been studied, but for the environment now. So what is that phenomena that you're fascinated to and curious to investigate? Then you could also look at an unsolved issue. So there are these studies that have holes in it, and the writers would purposely say, yeah, we actually don't have enough knowledge right now to solve this issue. So in the math world, for example, there are math theorems that continue to baffle mathematicians all over the planet, and they continue to study around that. So those things are always going to be good topics if you are more on the financial or money or numbers or any of that data side, right? So we're in data analytics. That might be something that will interest you. Another thing is new technologies. So how do new technologies impact our lives? So fintech is an example of that, wherein do you have financial technologies and you're a data analyst looking at this, how is that impacting our lives? Is it actually for the better or not? How is it impacting the people who work in that environment? And probably the fourth one here is finding a better solution to a problem. So if we look at it's essentially solutions that assist us for if you're interested in the traffic in the city that you're at because there's too many cars. But now looking at pandemic, there's suddenly no cars. But then with stage 3, there are cars again. With all of that data, is that something that you can study that will excite a better solution rather than just going back to what it used to be? So those things are topics that all you need to do is observe. You sit in front, you look at the world around you, and try to understand what are these things that get you to question, get you to go, really? When you have that moment, then it's a moment of opportunity for research.
Mhm.
So, Dr. Yap, you talk about the passion that you're bringing into research, but a question for you. What happens when a student or a researcher is passionate about a particular topic, but they realize perhaps in a month or perhaps in a year that their topic is not as hot as they expected and there's not enough research to support what they're trying to find out? Well, what are your suggestions there?
Well, one of the challenges of first-time researchers is always around um, this curve of excitement. So it kind of goes up, it's like a bell curve, and then it plateaus a little bit. And then now you're struggling to finish it, and then you get tired of it. A lot of people will drop the whole idea, either to go into another topic or drop the idea of research altogether. And passion is actually quite fascinating because is that really the passion content that they're working on, or was it passion based on very limited context when it first bubbled? And then beyond that is also where are they looking for content or available research to then inform them of the research that they're working on. If they're looking at Google and everything is just in Google, maybe that's not sufficient. We have our library, and our library has a lot of content. And if you're missing information, you can always go to our librarians who are very helpful and provide you additional suggestions on where to look for that content. We all know how to go to scholar.google.com, but that's actually just one piece. There are actual research sites, but unfortunately, some of them need payment, like academia.net or ResearchGate. And these are where the researchers go. So what I would suggest with that is that go to the library if you can't find, if you're stuck and you can't find the kind of content that you need, go to our library, ask our librarian to assist you, but also go to our reference library. If you're in Toronto, the research library in Bloor Street, which is available online, so you don't have to go there, is actually quite extensive. When I was doing my doctorate, I went there and actually looked at information and dusted books that people don't really go to. And they're available content because sometimes things may not be digitized just because they're germane content that may not have been available when digitization was being conducted, or they're not done yet, right? So ask people. Don't do this in a silo. Ask individuals like ourselves, like Professor Karen Sinat, Professor Andy Ohemeng, for example, will be able to help in figuring out where the locations are that you may not be looking at currently, right? So there's two things. What is the passion, really what that is, and where are you looking for information for that particular passion topic that you're looking for?
So, as an offshoot of the topic of passion, what are some of the personal challenges that you've experienced students having when they're conducting research? That's obviously a very stressful time, or it can be a very stressful time. What are some of
Totally.
the things that you have observed?
So in the last couple of years, on average, we would get around 75 to 150, that's a very big range, student research in the school throughout the whole school. So being the chair for research ethics, we see every single one of those research topics. And what challenges our students is they get tired of it. They get bored, and they did not expect that there's actually quite a bit of work when you're conducting research. So it's not for the faint-hearted. It is definitely a marathon, not a sprint. So you always make sure that you have a mindset that allows you to go through because life is going to take over sometimes, especially for longitudinal studies. And that means studies that's beyond one semester, and you're trying to understand trends, you're trying to understand movement. And because of that, you need time. But then time can actually bore people, and therefore they forget what they're doing. So Well, that's one of the main challenges, right? And then the other one is they probably don't have any schedule in place. One of the things that I've learned and I've told all of my students is to follow some form of a structure. So Pomodoro is a great idea. Time boxing is another strategy to use when you're conducting research, especially if you're new. It's very simple how to do this. You have to live with your calendar, unfortunately. So for those who are like, oh, I don't know what to do today, well, guess what? You need to make sure you block a time that you're putting in specifically for research. And it doesn't have to be 17 hours because you're not going to be able to finish all of it in one sitting. What you need is a block of time. So what I have in my calendar is that I have an hour every day, Saturday, Sunday, the whole time. At a specific time of day, I have mine is 6 to 7, and that's before dinner or whatever I need to do to actually go heads down and just do the work. I combine that with a strategy called Pomodoro, wherein it's intense studying and focusing for 25 minutes. You stop for 5 minutes, you do it again for 25 minutes, you stop again at 5 minutes. Guess what? That's a whole hour already, right? So as you keep doing that block. So those techniques work very well when you are trying to make sure that you're in a strategy to ensure you finish your research. So yeah, those are the things that hopefully can help you.
So you're suggesting at least an hour a day, every day.
Well, at least that's what I do. Maybe it needs more or less, depending on context, right? So depending on your life situation, depending on your ability to actually do a heads down. You can even have one of my colleagues when I was in my doctorate program, he used to study only for his research 30 minutes, but he does it twice a day. So it's still kind of like an hour, but he did 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes at night, and he just kept on doing that. And it seemed to have worked for him. I mean, he's a president of a company now. So.
Absolutely. Okay. Excellent. Thanks for the advice. So let's get on to your research and reviewers. Always the topic. How many reviewers do you actually think you need in order to be successful?
Well, that all depends on who the reviewers are, right? So it all depends on um, how much experience they have in reviewing your content, as well as probably their ability to understand what the research is. The thing is, there are two types of reviewers that you would want to have at least when you're starting. One is a content expert, so that then they can look at your content and be able to understand, have you exhausted what's needed for the particular topic that you're working on? And the other one would not have anything to do with the content, so that then they will look at it from a layman's perspective. The challenge with writers of content, or when you're writing about a content that you know very well, you end up talking about, you end up writing for a very limited audience, and if you're not in that area, they may not understand it. So sometimes you may need to simplify words, explain words, things like that. You don't have to dumb it down so much, but you have to have a level of accessibility to the content that you're writing, so that then you become more available for a wider range of people, which therefore then increases your brand, and be able to then say, somebody from a totally different industry or a discipline will be able to say, oh, I understood that content that you wrote. You wrote really well. And when you hear those words, it actually just means that you've written not just for your industry, not just for your discipline, but also for everybody else, so they can access that content. So I think that's always a strategy that not a lot of people recognize when they write, and it's something that I think might be useful for everybody.
Excellent. Great insight. So to round off our discussions today, I'd like to get personal. So when you did
Oh
your
dear.
Oh dear. When you did your research, Dr. Yap, when you did your research, what inspired you to continue moving forward even when it was difficult? I'll let you respond.
Oh, well, you kind of have to have a very good support system. Again, as I said a while ago, you can't do this alone. in my dissertation acknowledgement, where I thanked a bunch of people. I first thanked my mom, and the reason is that she's been my role model. She has written many many books, and I wanted to kind of follow in that footsteps. So that was important. And then I thanked all of my spouse, my siblings, who were there for me. But what's interesting is I also thanked I thanked my manager who inspired me, all of those things. So that's now the level of connections that were there for me when I was like, I can't do this anymore. But you've announced to the world that you're going to do it, so you kind of have to do it. But I also thank the people at Starbucks because 3/4 of my life was pretty much there drinking so much coffee to get me through struggle moments, right? So when you're kind of annoyed with the world, change the landscape where you're at, bring your laptop somewhere else, and then continue writing there. And it was quite helpful for me to go to a coffee shop where one, they know my name, and two, they know my drink, and three, nobody really goes there to that spot where I sit, and I have a plug, and I can just sit there for hours and get me to finish what I needed to do. So yeah, support system is a very important piece for completion of your research. Remember, research is not just a one pager. So for those who struggle to write assignments and we ask you to write a 10-page assignment, you may want to rethink how you're going to address research if you want to be a researcher, especially in the data analytics world, because this is part of who you are. And we read data. So we need to actually be able to contribute to the data that we read. And in so doing, that takes a bit of time. So be comfortable in writing, be comfortable in getting feedback on your writing. Don't take it personally. Criticisms are all about the work, not about you. And then be able to take that on and just learn from that. And in time, you will create your own voice. In time, you create your own way of writing and the way you choose your words. It's interesting that now, 30 years or so from when I started writing when I was a teenager, is that there is a Robin Yap writing. And there will always be one of the things that I always talk about in my writing is my mom. You will always see it in all of my writing. It will always say, my mom used to say this or whatever. And it has become part of my signature. So as you write, you become you get to learn who you are and how you write. And I think that will now make it exciting because in those difficult times you go, remember, I have a signature here. I'm accountable for this. So, I need to move forward. That helps, hopefully.
Amazing personal analysis, Dr. Yap. Thank you so much. We thank you very much for joining us today and enlightening us on your wealth of knowledge in the research area. Have a good day. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone, for attending.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank
Thank you so
you.
much. Thanks so much, Dr. Ruben and Dr. Edward.